In medicine, we frequently overemphasize the body's physical health because we can physically conceptualize it through physiology, anatomy, chemistry, pathology, etc. We cannot put thoughts and emotions on a slide and look at it under a microscope. Rarely do academic medical school curriculums emphasize mental health. I'll be going over the taboos of medical school. As medical students, we are immediately thrown into the deep end of the pool, where we must learn to swim, if not suffer the consequences. In a short period of time, we are given countless medical diagnoses, physiological and biological pathways to memorize, medications, their mechanism of action, and we must learn these quickly. A lot of people mention drinking from a fire hose. It is true. We are frequently tested, graded, and judged on our intellect based on how quickly we're able to spit out and regurgitate information we most recently learned. As you see next, through the rest of the taboos, there are multiple types of struggles medical students experience. The 6 topics we will cover is 1, mental health, 2, challenges with academics and imposter syndrome, 3, failing quizzes, exams, courses, step exams, 4, accommodations for physical and mental health disabilities, 5, taking a leave of absence, also called an LOA, and 6, finances. Welcome to Life as a Patient Doctor. I'm your host, Stephanie Moss, navigating life as a patient and a future MD. Walk alongside me as I reflect on the challenges and lessons I've learned undergoing medical school with invisible disabilities. Welcome. My name is Stephanie, and I'm currently an M4 at a Chicago medical school. I took a leave of absence from medical school during my 2nd and 3rd year of medical school to have mental health and physical health healing, continue studying for my Step 1 exam. I am married with 2 dogs. I'm a year behind my husband, who is now an intern in neurology. I want to share some advice about some pertinent topics that rarely people talk about, but it definitely needs to be documented. To note, this information is more specific to my medical school, but many schools have similar resources and procedures. I'll be going over my most popular blog posts, Surviving the Taboos of Medical School. So bookmark and save this for future. Also, share with other medical students, especially since these are taboo topics. I'm going to start with mental health because if you're human, you have a mind, and you will struggle at some point dealing with your own mental health. In medicine, we frequently overemphasize the body's physical health because we can physically conceptualize it through physiology, anatomy, chemistry, pathology, etc. We cannot put thoughts and emotions on a slide and look at it under a microscope. Rarely do academic medical school curriculums emphasize mental health as pertinent portion of an individual's health. I'm here to talk about your mental health as a future healthcare provider, all our mental health. As medical students, we are immediately thrown into the deep end of the pool, where we must learn to swim, if not suffer the consequences. In a short period of time, we are given countless medical diagnoses, physiological and biological pathways to memorize, medications, their mechanism of action, and we must learn these quickly. A lot of people mention drinking from a fire hose. It is true. We are frequently tested, graded, and judged on our intellect based on how quickly we're able to spit out and regurgitate information we most recently learned. As you see next, through the rest of the taboos, there are multiple types of struggles medical students experience. I'll also say that not just medical students, anyone, if you're human, you experience it. I want to emphasize in this number 1 taboo that you are not alone. I'm going to say that again. You are not alone. Everyone is struggling with their mental health, whether or not they're in a place that they're able to verbally acknowledge or even mentally recognize it. This is all part of being human. Each and every one of you deserves to be here. I know that imposter syndrome will set in at some point during your medical career, if it hasn't already. There will be moments when we notice our mental struggles, and sometimes they come out as emotions, which can be overwhelming, especially if we've been pushing them down for so long to focus on academics or patient care. These emotions can become so severe, pour out of our body as anger or sadness, frustration, or even apathy. In this last emotion, apathy, one might consider giving up on medicine or even life. I want to say that this is normal to have thoughts and emotions, even though they might scare you. You're not a bad person for thinking these things. I'm going to repeat that. You are not a bad person. You're just under a lot of pressure, and your body and mind is responding as a stress response. However, if these emotions are not addressed, they can become so overwhelming that you might start thinking about making a plan and acting out on those emotions of pain. If you see yourself actually coming up with a plan, being specific of how you might want to end your life, then this is time that we need to take serious action. Please tell someone. You can phone a friend, text a friend, a peer, a teacher, a mentor, anyone. The phone number 988 is the suicide hotline number, or always an emergency if you don't remember 911. This is the time where you must be brave and ask for help. I know from personal experience, it is very hard to ask for help, especially when you have these thoughts. I know, especially coming from a traumatic background myself, it's hard to ask anyone for help because you don't know if someone will actually be there to give you help or actually receive that help in a positive way. But just know this, there is someone that cares about you, that wants to help you, whether that's me or someone else. You are worthy. You have a purpose in this world. There's at least one person who cares and believes in you, even if that one person is me, Stephanie. If you'd like to read more about this specific topic on suicide and mental health, I have a couple blog posts that I have on the website linked, and I'll also link below. It's called The Call of the Void, Suicide Ideation. Also on my website, I do have mental health collection of resources like support groups, books, podcasts, and more resources for both patients and healthcare providers. Whew. Let's take a deep breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You made it through number 1. Now let's go to number 2. Challenges with academics and imposter syndrome. According to the AAMC, in 2021 to 2022 cycle, there were 443 individuals who applied to medical school for just 22,000 positions. That means 35% were accepted. Wow. In 2021, 11,576 pre-medical students applied to my medical college. Out of those interviewed and selected, only around 150 began as M1. That means only 1.3% were selected. If you're a medical student, you're part of that 1%. Congratulations. Keep this 1% number close to your heart, because there will be times, more than you can count, where you might feel unworthy, stupid, dazed. There's a lot of emotions. This will happen because you're now in a group of individuals who are also part of the 1%. Do not get worked up when you do not get the top grade or you're not in the 1% of your class. It will always be a bell curve. Be happy if you get average or the mean score, because that is it. It is the average of the 1% of this medical school class. If your school is in the pass-fail system like mine, then all you need to do is pass. And I feel like that is settled, but needs to be talked about more. All you need to do is pass. That means 70% usually. I know you hear it a lot, and it takes some time for that to sit in, but it's okay to pass. It's more than okay. It's awesome. That means that you have the knowledge that you need to have to be an amazing doctor. So that means at the end of the block, all your grades will be added together, all those quizzes, homework assignments, exams, and you just need to overall get above the 70%. You can do it. If you're struggling to understand something, 50% of your classmates most likely are also struggling. Reach out and ask for help from your classmates and academic mentors. Each school usually has a free tutoring service, so ask your academic advising early. Please don't wait until you fail that exam. But wait, I did say fail. That means you score below 70. It can be 69.9, but it's okay. It happens. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There are so many resources out there. Take a deep breath. It's okay, especially if you just started medical school. There is so many resources that they'll just throw at you. And every single different block or body system, there might be a different resource that might be better. And I promise you'll get your groove eventually. I heard it all the time from upperclassmen, but it does happen eventually. So looking at the different resources, I have a list on this blog post of the most common resources that you can do. And I highly recommend that you get it for at least all 3 years of medical school, maybe 4. I haven't touched a lot of these resources in a while, especially after I finished step 2. But specifically for the first 2-3 years, definitely. So I'm going to just name them most common ones for learning all subjects: boards and beyond, osmosis, ambos, online med ed. If you want to use the 20% off. Pathology, there's pathoma. Histology, there's a histology guide that is free. Memorize with pictures, you can use Sketchy, Pixarize, and Picmonic if you want to use the 20% off link. Anatomy, the University of Michigan Pictures is also free. Very helpful, especially when I was in COVID and had to learn for MSK block without having the body in front of me. That was really helpful. For quizzing, you definitely can use Anki. I personally don't use Anki. A lot of other people do. Like my husband used Anki all through medical school. He's still using Anki to study for his step 3 exam. That's him. It was too overwhelming for me, and that is okay. I'll get to that one in another blog post and podcast episode. Cardiology, there's a free University of Michigan heart sounds where you can actually hear the different hearts. I would say that is really helpful, especially for step 2, is where you hear, they'll have an image where you put your stethoscope virtually and you'll have to recognize it just from the sound, what type of murmur it is. So that's really helpful. For dermatology, DermNet is free. I think you would use that studying for step 2, maybe a little bit of step 1. UWorld. This one you definitely will use all 4 years. I need to get UWorld again for just my emergency medicine block. That's next month, which is sad because it already expired after I finished step 2. So I have to figure that out. Like I said, all the links are on my website on the actual blog, and I'll try to put some of them down below, at least the important ones. Number 3, failing. Quizzes, exams, courses, and step 1, 2, and step 3. I do have an entire blog post just on how not to fail step. So I'll put in a link. And this will just be a general explanation of what does it mean to actually fail in medical school. I hate the word failing, because in medical school, it just means you didn't score the minimum that the school put in place, usually 70%. So if you score below 70% on a quiz or exam, it's okay. It's not usually a huge impact on your final grade because it becomes an average. However, if you are scoring below 70% often enough, I highly recommend meeting with an advisor early. It's better to get resources early than after you actually fail a final course. If you score below 70% on the summative final exam or in the overall block, that would be a fail. However, it is okay. from my experience and talking to other medical students in my medical school and in other medical schools, at least a quarter of medical students fail a course at least once in their medical career. At least a quarter. That's huge. That's 25%. So what happens? At my school, if you fail, you will meet with the academic advisor and retake the exam during the next time off, whether if that's winter break, spring, summer break, or during your step 1 time period, or I guess step 2. Most schools do provide free tutoring and extra support to make sure you pass the retake exam. When the retake does come and you still don't feel ready, contact your advisor and ask for more time. You deserve to be at your best. Only take it when you're ready. That will come up multiple times on my podcast and blog. At my school, if you do retake and pass, then on your report card to residencies, it will show that you passed. They'll remove that fail grade. If you fail the retake, then sometimes more things happen, like you have to retake the entire course. There are other options. So I tell you, it is rare to fail the retake because you're going to have more time to study. Take it when you're ready. What happens if you fail more than 2 courses? At least in my school, when you retake the second exam and pass, the second grade will show up that you failed once and then passed it. I do want to note that this was written before my school removed grades from a lot of what they provided to residencies. A lot of residencies are really not caring about the grades in first year and second year, which is called the preclinical years, because they just want to know that you got through it and got through to take STEP. But we'll talk about that later. We'll talk a little bit about what will happen if you need to take some time off to study the STEP exams. You take it between your second and third year of medical school. However, some schools and international medical graduates do take it sometimes later, or sometimes DO students take it like after their third year. Every school is different, so look at your requirements. At my school, at the beginning of our M2 year, we're provided UWorld to start studying. I do have a blog post just for STEP. At the beginning of our M2 year, we're provided UWorld to start studying. Some people use the question bank at the same time. We are learning a specific subject in class. For example, second year medical school, we started with the sex and reproduction block. So you could go on UWorld and select the questions that are just force reproduction and just do questions on that. A lot of people do 10 to 40 days to allow you to learn, and then you're also studying a little bit. In the spring of our second year of medical school, we're given the first aid step 1 book and provided 2 months of dedicated study time, so about 8 weeks. At my school, there is specialized tutoring services, and they also some practice exam. But if you want more vouchers, you have to ask for your needs. If you fail a previous course and you have to study and retake during that dedicated time, that shortens the amount of step 1 prep time by at least 1 to 2 weeks. Take note of that. At my school, there is an opportunity to extend the time you're studying for step 1. One option is using the first month of your M3 year, usually around May, for your 4-week elective block. That gives you more time to study for step 1. But I will talk about that in a little bit more, especially in regards to taking additional time. What happens if you fail step 1? Let me tell you, it is scary, it is painful, but it'll be okay. I failed it, and I am still a 4th year medical student waiting to hopefully match a dream residency. It will be okay. So it was a little bit different when I took it. There was a minimum score that you had to reach to be above passing. That was the important thing, making sure on practice exams that you score above that minimum passing score. I have an entire blog post and a podcast all about how to not fail STEP. But I do want to mention, since we're talking about failure, it's okay if you fail. A lot of people do fail, and it happens, and you'll get through it. It'll be a lesson learned, and you'll be able to take STEP again, and you will work hard and you will pass. And there'll be something in the past Maybe it'll come up during your residency interview. It did for mine, but it was an opportunity to share what I learned. A big thing to not fail is to make sure that you're scoring above the passing score. At my school, they recommended at least 2 practice exams. If you're not doing that, then extend the test date. Paying more money to extend your test date is better than spending so much more money later when taking a leave of absence. Again, we'll link and talk more of that later. Okay, so this is actually really helpful. This tells us how many people are failing step 1. I have an article I linked from the AAMC that says, no, a step 1 failure won't doom your medical career. In 2017, 72% of USMD applicants, including both USMD seniors and prior graduates who failed step 1 on their first attempt, went on to residency. 72% who failed still got in to residency, compared to 94% of applicants who passed on the first time. That is huge. Keep that in mind. It says, however, we know from longitudinal data that within 6 years after graduation from medical school, more than 99% of graduates have records of graduate medical education or are in practice in the United States. 99% of graduates. That means if you keep pushing through and keep going and learn from those failures, whatever those failures are, if they're step 1, any challenge you will have, if you keep going and graduate medical school, you will be okay. You keep going, you can graduate and practice. I actually failed step 1, not once, but twice. It was a really hard experience. I actually have talked a lot about this experience and tried to help other students not fail and go through the challenges I have. In addition to writing blog posts, I've also written articles. There's one on Doximity titled, I failed step 1 by 1 point, because the very first time it was graded by points and it was just 1 point. Very difficult emotionally. So number 4, accommodations for physical and mental health disabilities. I'm also working on another all about accommodations, but here's a little snippet about accommodations and disabilities. All medical schools and exams are required to have some sort of accommodations available. However, not all schools value this or have individuals who know how to spread the word that they do exist. I unfortunately found out I could apply to accommodations after 2 years of medical school, failing 2 courses and failing step 1 exam. It took that long for me to learn that there were accommodations and that I actually considered that I qualified for them. If you struggle with any of the following things, and this is not inclusive, please talk to your school accommodations representative. 1, not finishing quizzes or exams in the time given. You feel like you have to skip over the questions or rush them, and you can't actually take the time to read them, pause, think about the question, and answer them. If you're finding that you have to quickly skip over the question and just put random answers, or maybe just need that additional 5 minutes, that might mean you could benefit from an accommodation for maybe extended time. If you need to take a bathroom, water, medication, snack break during your exam, and you're not actually given the breaks during the exam, that might be another reason. If you suffer from testing anxiety, if you have a diagnosed medical, physical, or mental health disability that you already know about, maybe you have a diagnosed learning disability like dyslexia. If you have a mental health condition that impacts your focus while in class or taking an exam, such as ADHD, anxiety, PTSD, depression, bipolar, all of these could be reasons that you might require accommodation. If you have a medical or mental health condition where you need to take time off to go to therapy or have medical appointments, that qualifies you as accommodations for you to leave clinic or just to have those times available. If you are breastfeeding, you can get accommodations for that. If you need time in private to do medical care, such as injections for insulin, infertility, other things. If you need a quieter room or just less people in the room during exams. If you need to sit in a chair during rounds or can't stand for longer than 30 minutes at a time, accommodations. If you have an acute injury or illness that will impact your academics longer than a week, probably a good idea. If you need time off during the day for other types of appointments, medications, or self-care during clinicals, also accommodations. Like I said, I have an entire blog post about just accommodations and disabilities, but I do link some more information in this blog. I link the medical school graduation questionnaire from 2020 of all schools summary report by AAMC. They did this questionnaire for medical students. 7.6 medical student graduates self-reported they suffered from a disability. And 0.6% said, I don't know. I do want to mention self-report. We already talked about it is a stigma, so it could be higher. However, from the ones that did say yes, it actually asked what type of disability. 61.1% put ADHD, 13% did chronic health disability, 3.3% did deaf or hard of hearing, 9.3% said they had a learning disability, 1.9% had a mobility disability, 15% said a psychological disability, 2.4% said a visual disability, and 6% said other. In total, of the 15,424 respondents of this medical student survey, 1,273 stated that they had a disability or I don't know. That's huge. Of those who stated they did have a disability and requested accommodations, only 2.9% were actually denied accommodations by their school. So worst thing that happens is they say no. I do want to say that again. Worst thing about asking for help is that they say no. Put in various links on where you can learn more about requesting accommodations. On Kevin MD, I wrote the article Requesting Disability Accommodations in Medical School. And then I do have different blog posts, such as Living with Chronic Medical Conditions as a Clinical Medical Student, Requesting Disabilities Accommodation in Medical School. I do want to state that even if you don't receive accommodations, everyone still needs time to take care of their health. That's why on my website, I have tons of resources for mental health. Each year, 300 to 400 physicians die by suicide. Text or call 988. So please do not be this statistic. Let's change how individuals in medicine talk about their mental health. I have a resource just for individuals with disability. Go to the resource page, you can click disabilities, or if you want to learn how to, as a healthcare provider, how to help people with disabilities, go to disabilities tab on the bottom for healthcare provider. I do switch out my collection resources, the top for individuals who have the condition, and then down below for healthcare providers. Phew, let's take a deep breath all together. Let's do a different breathing technique. So this time, I want you to put your hand on your heart, either on your chest, on your neck, or on your wrist. Let's feel your heart rate. Let's connect back into our body before we go on to number 5. Take a deep breath for 4 heartbeats. Breathe out for 4 heartbeats. In for 4 heartbeats. Breathe out for 4 heartbeats. Notice your heart will go slower as your body focuses on your heart rate and your breathing, activating your parasympathetic. Number 5, taking a leave of absence, LOA. I do actually write an entire blog post and podcast just about taking a leave of absence. There are 2 types of leave of absence for medical school, academic and personal. When one takes a leave of absence from medical school, one must sign a piece of paper from administration. An academic leave of absence is when the school decides you must take a leave because you failed too many courses, have to retake a year, or have to retake the board exam. It is important to note that it's not seen as favorably by residencies. Now, a personal leave of absence can be for any reason, and you don't have to state what that reason is. You can just check mark, and it's important to do that before major concerns happen and you're forced to do an academic leave of absence. So some reasons you would take a personal is maybe family obligations, health concerns, research, or just needing to take a break. When you actually do residency applications and interviews, you will most likely be asked about it. I was asked a lot, but it allowed me a great opportunity to talk about what I did during that leave of absence and how I grew as an individual in a future position. On the ERAS application, which is the online application to submit to residency, it asks you if you've taken some time off, and then in a couple sentences to actually explain. Again, another blog post, another podcast, all about that. So some things to consider if you're going to take a leave of absence. First, how will you finance this time off? It's important to note you are not allowed to take federal loans when you're on a leave of absence. And if they give you the loans, you'll have to pay them. You have to give them back. So how will you finance, including how will you finance your health insurance? If you're not 26 anymore and not on your parents' insurance, you'll have to figure out how you're going to get health insurance, whether that's Medicaid, extending your school's health insurance, things like that. Next, does your school provide continuing access to academic study spaces and tutoring? Where will you live? Will you need to work? Do you qualify for any financial aid assistance through the city, state, federal programs? And then in that blog post and podcast, I surveyed students who had taken leave of absence and do their information and recommendations. So check that one out. Last one is finances in medical school. I do put down more examples of my personal experience with all financial traumas and realities in medical school, called The Financial Realities of Being a Medical Student of a Lower Socioeconomic Status. Couple of quick facts. Did you know 30% of medical students take 0% of loans? 30% of medical students in the United States take 0 loans. I'm not in that 30%. So who's paying for their tuition and living expenses? From our study and from this data from the AAMC, usually family. 33% of medical students come in with outstanding undergraduate and pre-medicine loans. I'm one of the 33% paying for college. The median amount of total scholarships were over 4 years of graduate medical students reported was $25,000. So a lot of times they say, oh, you can get scholarships. I was very lucky that 50% of my tuition, I received scholarship all 4 years, but that's of tuition. So I still had loans for the other 50% of academics and also living expenses. Next, 21.1% of 2020 graduating medical students had non-education student debt, which means 78.9% had 0 non-educational debt. So like credit cards, houses, just to know, especially just to apply to medical school, it costs about $10,000. So things to note. I also put the 2020 medical school graduation questionnaire that goes through whether people have 0 debt, $1,000 to $25,000 debt, people who have more than $150,000 of non-debt, maybe that's purchasing a home. Another fact, in 2020, 11% of graduating medical students had between $300,000 and $400,000 in medical school debt, which means nearly 3% had between $400,000 and $500,000. And about 1% had more than $500,000 in debt. I like saying this statistic because it really is kind of upsetting when individuals say, oh, medical school have averaged $200,000 of debt. The thing is, it's an average. And we looked above, there's a lot of people who don't take any. They take 0 debt. That brings the average down. For my husband and I combined, we're going to be at that almost $500,000. I put actually a really cool video on why medical school costs so much. So the changing cost of medical school. So you can see that linked. I also put in kind of the cost of medical school. And there's a link that you can go to what every single medical school costs. I don't know how like recent that's updated. Average cost of tuition per year is $54,000. Average cost of tuition for 4 years is $218,000. That's just the tuition. You have to remember, people have to live, maybe not well, but they have to live. They have to eat. They have to get food. They have to have a place to sleep. Total living expenses usually allocated for all 4 years is $116,000, which equals out to $29,000 per year. So medical students are living at $29,000 a year. So if we add that together, total tuition for 4 years, which is $218,000, and then the living expenses of $116,000, we put it together, that's where the $334,000. Now, don't get me started on compound interest. That's a whole nother thing. I thank you that my husband, he loves math. And so he'll help me on that post. Then I go through the average cost of living expenses according to the school versus how much it is per reality. For example, for the school back a year ago, they gave us a monthly allowance of $2,400. So they're hoping that rent will cost you about $1,400 with utility, transportation, car repairs, insurance, about $380, miscellaneous, including food, entertainment, clothing, only $200 per month. That's less than half of our food budget. And that doesn't even cover our dog's food budget, which is $100 a month. But anyway, educational resources, they give us $400 a month. You really can't pass medical school without all those online educational resources. To end, I do talk about that a single medical student who takes out 100% of loans for living expenses without any parental financial support is around 250% of the federal poverty level annual income. A big thing to note is that medical school and students who come from low-income communities and are underrepresented in medicine for their color of their skin, their race, their heritage, they actually have less financial assistance because they don't have family to help with their medical school and living expenses. I talk about that a lot. It is noted that individuals sometimes pay for private tutors. Even though we do have tutors part of the school, they're usually just upperclassmen. Students might choose to use money to actually pay for professional tutors. And I end this post on finances, all the additional financial resources that I've used a lot during my leave of absence, but it's good to note if you do take student loans, you can increase your student loans at any time of the year for medical costs. So if you pay for your medicines, for your copays, anything that the insurance doesn't cover, you can submit those receipts and increase your loans. That's huge. You can also increase your loans for a computer or a tablet once for the entire 4 years of medical school. Every year, you can request 2 flights home. And then there's other things they actually just uploaded from my school. You can actually increase your loan amount for dependents. So that is huge. Other things, food stamps, which during COVID, they did allow individuals who were students to go on it, which was so helpful. But you have to have no financial support and no additional income, including your partner. Linked to food banks, food support, an amazing place called Lasagna Love, which gave free lasagnas. Thank you so much for getting us through my leave of absence where we had no money. Medicaid, I linked to the Medicaid application, Chicago utility support, and then also WIC application if you or your partner have a young child. Did I forget anything? That was a lot, but I'm so thankful that you kept with me through the end. We covered 6 topics that are taboos in medicine and in medical school, such as mental health, challenges with academics and imposter syndrome, failing quizzes, exams, courses, and STEP, accommodations for disabilities, taking a leave of absence, and finances in medical school. Did I forget any other taboos? Let me know in the comments if there are other taboos that exist in medicine that I should cover. Also, check out my website, medpsychmoss.com, where you can actually read this blog post and other ones that have way more detail on each individual topics. If you haven't already, click follow on the podcast that you're listening, whether if it's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, on YouTube. Thank you. And you can find me on any social media, medpsychmoss. That includes TikTok, Twitter, X, Instagram. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next podcast. Take care, and thank you for listening to my journey as a patient doctor.